Okay, Zoom, that's cool. It's not like you guys wanted to see me anyway. No. All right, I guess I'll be right back. Don't you love technology sometimes? All right, one more try. There we go. Third time is a charm. Okay, sorry for the hold up. We are going to dive right on into our capstone check-ins. Alba, you're on the top left corner of my screen. Why don't you go first?
Okay. For my capstone, as you guys know, it's the site for food pantries here in Syracuse, New York, and how to display for the people here in Syracuse how to get to different pantries, what hours, what requirements. I've been working on moving everything into React. And I have been able to move all of the information into the React app. So everything is working properly. I guess you could get to the north side information, the east side information, west side, and south side, and then have the different options with social media handles and their websites to get into the pantry information and how to get into their sites. I also have the contact form already made to have the information be sent to me. And if a new pantry wants a request, they could go and put their information and send it to me to request to be put into the form. And a pantry sign-in login form, this will be only for like the pantries that are in the site. If they want to update their own information, their address, their hours, if their hours change, if their requirements change, they could update it themselves instead of having to send a request to me to be able to do it. I guess the only issue I've been having and the most work I've been working on is actually getting the pantry information. I'm still trying to get in touch with Food Bank of Central New York to see if they could put their flyer for the mobile food pantry and the fresh food pantry into their website itself, so it could be linked, and whenever we click on it, it goes directly into their flyer. But I haven't been able to get in touch with them at all. I have a large binder that I have to call all of the pantries to see if they're still working, and if they're still on, if they're not, if they changed their hours, if their addresses have changed. So it's just a lot of footwork to try to even get the information for the pantries. But as far as the website, I'm all caught up to the database point, which we're going to be going into next, to be able to update it to make it more functional.
Awesome work. And I know there's a lot that's been going into it. So I'm glad to see it all coming together. I'm see that you've got your links across pages. I see that you've got your router working, like all major wins. And I'm really excited because you've got your forms all set up too. So now as we head into database week, we start learning how to get information in the database, how to get information out of the database, but then we start getting into full stack and starting to say, hey, what happens when that form gets submitted? How does that information go into the database? How do I go in and update it? All of that kind of stuff. So spot on, great work. And you are all queued up for the last third of the boot camp, which is exciting. So awesome work, keep it up. Exona, I have you on my list next.
Oh boy, okay. Well, I can't top that off. So I'm gonna share my screen. I don't really have a lot, to be honest with you. I know that I was supposed to meet with you yesterday at 12
Who
o'clock.
you calling boring? Oh, sorry.
No, nothing like that. No, I really don't have a lot. I know I try to transfer some of my code from vanilla JavaScript into React, but for some reason my my pages weren't loading or weren't showing up as much. I'm gonna show you some of the code that oh, is this the one that I have? Nope, that's not the one. I have so many, I'm sorry. Nope, that's not the one either. Clearly I'm not prepared. So do you want to wait until I can find it and have someone else go so I'm not
Yeah,
wasting
that's
time?
fine.
Okay, perfect.
Brandon. Sorry, I caught you mid-bite.
Okay, hello. So yeah, I was having some trouble getting everything moved over. Because hold on, let me. It's back over here. Can you see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay, sweet. So yeah, so I was getting trouble getting things moved over because on top of the fact that I was still just muddling around with my idea, finally got a bit more settled with that. But there were certain elements that when I tried to get them over to React, I couldn't locate the points where it was broken. So this is the how it's supposed to look right now, but when in React the carousel got broken. Still need to work on getting the links and things together, but yeah, I'm still very much under progress, but I'm seeing my direction a bit better.
Good. Yeah, and sometimes the hardest part is just getting it out of your head, right? Because sometimes you've got the big picture and you've got the idea, but then when you go to actually implement it, you stumble because you're like, whoa, how do I actually pull that off?
Like,
And that's
what am I
all
gonna need, what am I not going to need, and where to
exactly.
the back end.
And that's all part of engineering, right? Of figuring out how to implement our idea, how to break it down into those small parts. So that's when I find it's really helpful to use like a Google Doc or use even just pen and paper, right? And draw it out or say, okay, instead of just saying headline and paragraph, what actually goes in that headline? What goes in that paragraph? sometimes that makes it easier to realize, oh, well, if I need to keep track of all of these plants, I need a list somewhere on my site where if they click on it, they can get access to more details about it, right? So it definitely is a lot to get out of your head. I'm glad that you're doing that in vanilla HTML, but schedule a one-on-one with me for your carousel, right? Because sometimes when we get hung up at one point, it's hard to move past it. So I can help you a little bit on your React stuff there, or you can schedule with anyone else. But good steps. Glad that we're seeing some progress here. We just want to get it over to React so that we're set up for integrating into the database.
Thank you.
Zone, are you ready?
Yeah, almost there.
Go for it.
But yes, okay. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, so I have, why am I not sharing? Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So this is my my React. I created many folders for the many pages that I have. This is my app. I've imported I've did the imports and the routes as well. Haven't done anything else. When I go to a specific page, like let's say the login page, it's supposed to look something like that, but it looks like this. So I haven't been able to fix it. So mainly what I want my pages to look that I've done so far is this. So this is going to be me, what all of my majority of my web pages are going to look like with this, with this nav bar and the sidebar here as well. And I created an account page and a login page as well. So that's pretty much all I have so far. Again, I haven't been able to put them in React because of styling. I've put them in React, but I haven't styled it properly. But that's pretty much all I have so far.
Love it. Love seeing that you're kind of starting to formalize, hey, I've got a nav bar, I've got a sidebar, right? Starting to think through, this isn't just about different pages worth of information. This is about how do we navigate this, right? How do we change from one route to the next? And starting to identify, hey, we do need a login, but if we have a login, we also need a register, right? So I know you had a lot of that work done in your HTML.
Yes.
And we'll figure out whatever's going on with your CSS. I think you have so much CSS that we really need to like pull apart the individual pieces of it to get it working in React. But other than that, like really love the direction you're headed in here. Love seeing that you've got all of these pages thought down to, hey, I can't just put a search icon in there. I need a search page, and that's going to need search results to show up and all of that stuff. So
Right,
you're
yeah.
really set up well for moving forward and integrating in the database, which is what we'll be learning this upcoming week. So awesome work.
Thank you. I wanted to create the folders. That was the hardest part. It was actually creating those folders to see, you know, like to divide, hey, I need CSS and this and JavaScript and maybe more information as time goes by. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And the folders are to your point, really going to set you up for when you start getting into it and you're like, whoa, this is a really big page, then you'll be set up to do your own separate components, right? And that's a good note of, I don't want anyone to panic and go, oh my God, my Capstone looks nothing like that, because I have seen Capstone projects that are literally one page and don't even need the router, but have thousands and thousands of lines of code to pull them all off. One of them was a grocery store shopping app where not only could you load all of your items in and it was all on one screen, but when you hit the route button, it used an algorithm to figure out what the shortest path was throughout the store. Thousands and thousands of lines of code to pull that off, one user interface screen. So if you see a bunch of pages and go, oh, I have nothing done to that level, that is okay, right? Everyone's Capstone is going to be a little different. And now that we're getting more into the back end, now you get to kind of say like, hey, this is cool. I want to spend more time in JavaScript, right? Or, hey, the database is cool. Maybe my project leans more that way. Or, hey, you know what? React has been a lot of fun. Maybe I want to spend more time in CSS and make sure I really understand components and clean up my code there. So this is where we start to kind of split off and where everyone's capstone becomes unique. Sometimes you get through to the end of your capstone and you're like, I never want to write another line of CSS again, because you wrote, you know, this beautiful interface and all of that stuff, and you learned what you didn't want to do. But this is kind of the fun of the capstone, is that it's your project and you get to decide what you make of it. So awesome work. Love seeing that everything's kind of thought out there.
Thank you.
Reschedule your one-on-one with me so we can get your CSS fixed if you haven't
I-
already.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely will. Thank you.
Cool. Brian.
All right. We'll share my screen. So my capstone was an app that kind of allowed you to post a game, basically, and people would be able to see that game. So this is the login page. It's pretty basic. You know, work on it as time goes on, but also have, you know, a button if you already are signed up, you can log in. But in this case, we'll log in. So yeah, so on this page is I tried to go for it as like, you know, just a single page application. As you can see on the right are games that have been posted. The top, it's not labeled as such, but this is a filter. It filters in real time. So as you can see, this is all the games. Kind of working on shortening that list, but just for the sake of just seeing it, that's all the games that are currently in the game. So if I filter by basketball, it'll show all the basketball games. If I filter by distance, it'll show the games that are less than that selected distance away. And if I go by the surface, it'll show the surface. And it even goes, I could do it in real time if I change, like, you know, one of these games is 24 miles away. If I say less than 10, it'll show just the one that's 6. So based on the suggestion of Max, I was able to, you know, work on the filter and get that to adjust those. I can reset and show all the games again once the filter is gone. One thing that can happen too is I wanted to show if there's no games that match. Instead of showing the games, it will just show that H2 over there that says there's no games that match, and you just reset the filter. As far as the buttons on the games, the more button just shows some more details of the game. This is kind of just a dummy picture to kind of simulate like a Google Maps, something being in there to try to show you the location. And if you close, that just takes you back. This is just so you know, this is another page. So I use Router to navigate to that. That takes you back. As far as the games, they can be deleted. I just click on that button, and that's a function that just basically takes the game out of local storage. And lastly, just to make a game, you can select the sport, select the surface, some details. All right, and post that in long list, but that'll show up down at the bottom. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, as far as the miles, I just inside the add game function, I just made another little function that just randomly creates a random number of miles between like 0 and 50. That plugs it in there just to kind of simulate what it would be like for someone to have games with different mileage.
Awesome work.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the app.
There is, believe it or not, an entire field devoted to what it takes to get mapping working in programming. GIS is the category of it. And it is a rabbit hole you can definitely fall down. If you are interested in maps and geography and want to know how to get maps and geography working in computers, there are all kinds of systems that exist just for that. I think that I love how you use local storage to kind of simulate the database. And we'll definitely be getting into the point where you can log in and have multiple users use it, because right now that's the limitation of local storage, right? It's local to the computer. But love seeing that you've got like all the create, read, update, delete operations thought through. Love seeing that you've got routing not only working to that other page, but like specific to that game. I think that because you're a couple weeks ahead, two things to look into would be in your when you add a game, using Google for autocomplete on addresses so that you can start typing in a street name and number and then have it like auto populate, different address suggestions. And then you could also use that, because once you get the autocomplete working, it's much easier to get the map working as well. So those are two things to consider moving forward, while we're waiting to catch up on the full stack nature of it all and building our own APIs. I think that both the address autocomplete functionality and the getting the map to work will be two good challenges for you to take on. The address autocomplete, I know Google is the dominant one there. And then just to give you an option for getting the map to show up itself, you could use Google Maps, and their API will be free based off of however many times the map shows up a month. But if you want to look into an alternative, OpenStreetMap is another alternative that's pretty popular and entirely open sourced. It uses something called Mapbox under the hood. But just things to consider if you're looking to say, hey, let me get this set up before we get into learn how to do the full stack stuff. We won't have an example project with mapping in it. However, obviously there are lots of uses for learning how to get maps working. So something to consider. But awesome work. Love seeing it all over in React.
I appreciate that, and that's definitely kind of where I was headed next in terms of functionality in there. So I appreciate that suggestion.
Most people like to start with the map itself and getting the map to show up, but the trick is to actually start at the address creation, because once you have the address coming in right, it becomes much easier to get the map to show up, as opposed to when you just have some text field and you dump that into Google and you say, hey, Google, show this map. Google's like, what map do you want me to show, right? Like, 123 Main Street. Well, there are 4,000 main streets all over the place. What map do you want? And so all those maps are coordinate based. And so that introduces the problem of, well, how do I get a user to type in an address and have the right map show up? So that's why it's helpful to start at the address autocomplete and then go from there.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Great work. And if you need any help, feel free to schedule a one-on-one with me. This is where it starts to get fun, right? Because you guys show up and you go, all right, I need to get a map working. And I'm like, I don't have any code for a map working, right? So I got to kind of scramble and read the documentation with you guys and learn how to do it. So feel free to schedule if you need any help.
We're building boats as we go.
Yes. We most certainly are. I do not see our trail. Make sure. Yeah, okay. Jennifer, you're up next.
Hello.
Hello.
How are y'all? All right. Here we go. All right. So to this point, I've gotten all of my tabs up there. I've got the routers set. I don't have them working, so I'm still trying to figure that out. What else did I accomplish? I was able to move in a lot of the information. The tricky part, if you want to see it, is that when I'm opening this up, it's showing me everything on one page. I'm going to show you. I don't understand why that's happening. So I need more work on this, but let me just get this over here. And yes, I'm hooked on word games. There we go. So it's all on one page.
Well, it's
So-
a start.
Yeah, it's something. Not entirely sure what's going on, but yeah.
So we probably don't want all of this in the home page. We probably want to go to the router and create separate routes for each one of the components that you have.
Yeah, I'm missing some things then because I thought that I had. That should be in home, right?
No, unless should all of those components be showing up in the home page? Or did you want about to be a separate page and animal info to be a separate page?
That's what I did. Okay.
So you got all the components set up right, which is good. But what we need to do is, instead of saying, hey, all of these components should show up on the home page, instead what we want to do is go to app.js and say, hey, in addition to the home route, there's also going to be an about route and an animal info route and all of that stuff. So you want to reuse line 11 a couple times over and take all those imports and all those components that you did in your home, move them into app. And that sounds like a huge lift. It's probably only going to take you 10 minutes to do it. And then you'll have your separate pages set up.
Ooh, okay. I know this is not exactly how I have to have it, just so you don't worry. But I'm just going to put that in there now.
Yep.
So I'm not forgetting it later.
The imports are going to go up at the top.
Oh, at the top. Okay.
And then the routes are the new code that you've got to create. So once you get that done, then you can focus on using your link tags, because once you have them all set up in separate routes, you're going to want to replace your A tags, your anchor tags, with all of your links so you can actually navigate between the pages. But the good news is you've got the hard part done. You've got the pages created. You've got forms set up. Now it's just a matter of, hey, are these showing up the way that I want? So little things that I'm noticing, like I think in login or about, you had a class instead of a class name. Try login. Yeah, we got some leftover classes in there.
Yeah.
But other than that, you've got everything set up. Now it's just a matter of navigating between it, and then you'll move into the back end from there. So this is a near perfect check-in. Like, this is exactly where we want you guys to be at this point, right? And everyone, like I said, is going to have a different number of pages and linking, and some people's back end and databases are going to be more complicated than the front end. But you're really set up here to say, okay, now I need to start getting information to show up on those pages. How do I do that? And so that's exactly where we want you to be.
Okay, well, great. At least it's not looking like Latin to me, so I'm happy with that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, being able to read and understand and explain your capstone is probably more important than being able to write and create your capstone, right? It's kind of like, yeah, that's just very, very important. We actually had a call with an employer earlier today, and they said, you're doing great in interviews, and they had no problem answering the questions, tell me a time when, and all of that stuff. But what I really want them to be able to do is show me that they understand the code. It's one thing to be able to write it. It's another one to be able to understand it. So I'm glad that it's kind of making sense. And even those little things, right, of, hey, you need to put that in their own routes, all of a sudden that's a light bulb moment that you'll never forget, right? When you go into your next React app, you're going to say, okay, I can use components in other components, but I don't want to. I want to use this component as an entirely separate page. And that's why we need routing. And so that's all part of the process, right? That's why the capstone is so open-ended, so that you can kind of figure out what you don't know to get it to what you do know or what you want it to do. So
Yeah.
awesome work.
Okay, thank you so much.
I do not see Bobby. So Kalai, you're up.
Okay. So my project is about doing the emergency department in the hospital, you know. So for that, first I started with the HTML page. You see the page, Max?
Yep, you're good.
I'll see that. Okay. So for that, first I create. So I made my login page in like most of the thing. I started working on my HTML and CSS. So I can just log in, so first I started with the hospital admin page because I have like different component of like how the 911 can have their own page, the outpatient can have their own page, but right now I'm just focusing on the hospital administration, how they can access each individually, like emergency room, how they can access it. As well as they can access separately to the 911 and the outpatient. So when they click in the emergency room, you can see the whole emergency room status, number of patients, available doctors, all the details. And then in the dispatch, they can see like how many patients are with 911, or like, you know, seriousness of the patients and condition of the patients, etc. So then based on that, they can actually give the number to the patient waiting, so that this kind of makes easy for the outpatient. So they know how long the waiting time is going to be in the emergency department. So this is going to be the outpatient. So they know like how many patients. So here the outpatient details going to be updated, each patient's their age, and you know, whoever come to the hospital, their names will be updated here and their vitals will be updated here. So each time the hospital clicks the patient name, they can click each name and they know the thing. And based on overall, this year, it's going to give the overall status about how many patients are in the actual ER, how many patients are with 911, and those details will with the waiting room as well as the checked in patients. So it's kind of basically, I want to make it easier for the patients waiting in the waiting room, so that they know how long the waiting is going to be, so that everything can be managed easily. So this, so far I made it. So thanks to Caitlin and Max. So I kind of moved some of them to the React app. So each time I click to the ER, I can actually go to the ER page, as well as the dispatch can go to the dispatch. So still I need to work on like how the data is going to be updated, like those forms, as well as I need to make more like how the outpatient is going to, like, you know, when I am home, I can actually log in myself and check how long is going to be the waiting in the particular hospital. So I was planning on doing multiple hospital, but Jason was advising me that it's better to just start with one hospital instead of doing multiple hospitals, so that it will be easy. So like I can be sick and I can still from home, I can check in myself, you know, if I have to go, and I can know the wait time. Based on that, I can go to the hospital instead of going there and waiting for too long. That's the goal of my project. So I still need to make a lot of CSS and stuff done. So, but
Awesome. I
yeah,
love to
so
see it coming together. You've got all your pages created, you've got your form inputs in, you know, it starts to become more real, right? Now we see, yes, we need more pages and more views for different users, which is a very common thing, right? For applications to have different user roles of, hey, I've got an admin and I've got a writer and I've got a viewer, right? In your case, it's the 911, it's the hospital, it's the patient, but really love seeing that come to life, right? Seeing what all of those different stats are is going to make it a lot more fun when we get to the API of being able to have all those different users be able to see all that same information just in different views and perspectives. So another great one. You definitely met all the requirements because you've got linking down, you've got your components down. Now it's just a matter of continuing to clean up the user interface and getting the rest of those pages created, so that when we get to the API, you're all set and ready to go and start saying, okay, when that number gets updated, what needs to be saved to the database, what screens get updated, all of that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Very good work. I do not see Torres. Don't skip anyone. Karen, I have you up next.
Yay. Yay. I actually raised my hand to give myself as tribute. So I know that you mentioned, so I know that you mentioned, we can't be like, oh my gosh, my capstone looks nothing like, the others. But oh my gosh, my capstone looks nothing like the others. To be honest, playing catch up, I haven't even touched React yet. Let me share my screen. So to refresh you all as to, what I'm kind of doing with my capstone project, I want to make it so that civilians, I call them civilians, know what type of product recommendations that they are able to use on their hair, depending on their hair texture. So, okay, where am I? And I know, Max, you mentioned that like a weather component in that app would kind of beef up a little bit the code and the recommendations for civilians as far as pretty much how to address their hair issues for the day or for the week looking ahead. Okay, so creating my, style sheet, it's like I said, my HTML, it's extremely simple. It's very, very simple. It's until I add CSS and JavaScript, making the distinction between fine, medium, and normal hair, and showing a picture as far as what that hair tends to look like. Oftentimes we can touch the hair to know if it's fine, medium, or coarse, but civilians need like characteristics as far as what the hair actually does in order to identify that. So I have a label for characteristics. Let me share what that looks like. So of course, here I am, I'm trying to add the blog as far as more information specific to identifying hair care issues and just topics of 21st century hair things. And it didn't do what I wanted to do. So I know that let me share that. I know that I have that to, really work on, but like I said, I don't know if you still see my screen. Like I said, I'm not far. It's in fact, it's very remedial. That's where I'm at. That's just where I'm at, and just playing catch up.
Yeah, definitely want to focus in on this because we want to get you caught up, right? So finding the time to invest into it, we want to say what's MVP here. If it's the blog post, then that's great, right? If it is, hey, I need some interface where I can enter my hair characteristics and get some product recommendations, that's great. We don't need to boil the ocean, but we want to focus in and say, hey, can I look at this site and feel like I know how to use it, right? Can I actually feel entering the data and having it filter out? Or can I see how I would create a new blog post and maybe put certain tags on it? And that way, based off of the tags, I could say, hey, I want to see all the blog posts about shampoo, or I want to see all the blog posts about quartz hair, right? There are lots of different directions we can go here, but we're not feeling that interface yet, right? And so that's what you want to focus in on. Oftentimes we get lost in our own code when we don't have an objective set. And there's so many things that we want to try and build, but when we get stuck, we pivot and we go try to build something else. And sometimes you've got 90% of it done, but that last 10% is causing all of it to not be done. So I would say narrow in on your objective and say, hey, what's the most important feature of this website? What is it that when I show this to someone else, I want them to say, that's great, I want to use that website, I want to go there, and figure it out from there, right? So if it's the weather component of different hair types and pulling in API data, that's great. If it's the blog with different tags, that's great. If it is, there's so many different directions you can take it, but I want you to narrow in on one and say, that's what I'm going to build. And even if the user interface looks terrible, I want to get it all out on the page, and then I can go back and make it pretty because we've got that full stack API coming up, right? And we won't be able to integrate the database or get any data showing up if we don't have that user interface nailed down. So that's what I would suggest narrowing in on. And if you need to draw it out, but don't use, empty boxes. Actually put in the words of the buttons, right? Actually say, okay, this is a drop down, and then I'm going to put a little arrow to the drop down and say, here are the 5 things that are going to be in that drop down. Okay, now they hit that search button or submit button or go button or whatever it is. Where does that take them? What is supposed to show up? If we can narrow in on those objectives, it makes it much easier to actually build out that interface.
I gotcha. And a question that I have, I know that I have to book some one-on-ones with you in order to kind of build up more of my project, but I didn't know that if it was if it was mandatory to have like a login. I mean, I understand like the navigation, because you kind of want to know where you're going, but like the login portion, I didn't know if that was something that like we have an account at this app, we'll remember and store your information.
It's not a requirement of the Capstone. We will certainly be learning how to do a login screen, and I know several of you guys have said in one-on-ones, like, I got my login, how do I make it work? And it's like, all right, slow your roll. We've got to get to password encryption. We got to get the database set up. We've got to get the APIs working, but we will be covering how to make a login system. And we will talk about how to do that securely and make sure that if your password ever leaked, that you wouldn't have to worry about it because it would be in an encrypted system. So we definitely will be building out a login system in class that will be something that you can take directly and integrate it into your Capstone. However, it is certainly not a requirement, right? There are lots of websites that we use that don't require a login, right? I would be really annoyed. In fact, I am really annoyed anytime I go to the New York Times and they're like, give me money, sign in. And I'm like, I don't want to give you money. I want to read the darn article. That is an example, right, of a site that doesn't really need a login, but it does because you would have to pay for access. There are plenty of websites that we use that we don't log into because they probably aren't saving our information, or if they are, we can kind of post anonymously. So definitely not a requirement of the Capstone. I would say, I don't know, between 1/3 and 1/2 of all Capstones have a login system. But oftentimes they have the page set up, but they don't actually integrate all of that user information into it. Authentication is hard. Secure authentication is even harder. So if, Taryn, to your point, if they have an interface where they enter their hair characteristics every time and it just filters down for them, that's fine. Now, if you wanted to save that information so the next time they came to the site, it would automatically fill in, that's when we start needing to get into user authentication and being able to tell our users apart. However, definitely not a requirement. And I'm glad I'm glad you mentioned that because I don't want anyone rushing into an auth system.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions about authentication before we actually get to it in probably 3 weeks?
Along those lines, are we gonna learn about how to make the contact forms actually work? Like when they input the information and then that's okay.
We're going to learn how to do that. We're going to learn how not only how to store user authentication securely and encrypt it with a technique called hashing. We are also going to learn how to use an email API. So we're going to use SendGrid, and not only are we going to build out the contact form to send off an email to yourself or to whoever, we're also going to build an entire forgot password flow so that you can, on your login screen, say, hey, I forgot my password, and get a link in order to reset it. With that said, once we get to that point, we've left the 100 level of class and we're moving up to the 200 level. Things certainly get a little bit more complicated. Latonia can attest to that because we've built out an entire email flow where you can interact with her website, her React app, and then type your email down at the bottom. It pulls everything out of local storage and fires off an email. Well, firing off an email sounds like something that should be about 3 lines of code and ends up being about 300 lines of code. So at that point, we usually split off as a class. And you can say, hey, I want to learn how to do the login system. Learning how to send an email is really important. I'm going to tune in on that. Or you can say, tap out. I'm not doing a login system. I'm overwhelmed by full stack. I've got 40 pages to make in my capstone. I'm going to go do that instead. That gets to the last 2.5 weeks of class. We normally hit that point. So we'll definitely have options rolling forward, but just wanted to let you know on that. Got a lot of people to go hound down after class and say, you don't get out of a capstone check-in just because you're not in class tonight. Schneider, I think you're the last one. Before you go, did I forget anyone? Okay, Schneider, go for it.
Awesome. So I'm happy at where I am because in the beginning of this whole reacting, I was definitely drowning, but I put into work and got the concept down. So my page is or my capstone is like, I guess, a new site or whatever, but like for electric vehicles and whatnot. I have the home page done, but it's not here because I was practicing routing and make sure that whole thing is working. As you can see, it's working, I hope. The problem I came across was my my nav bar. I thought I fixed it. I created a component for all that good stuff, but I don't know how to implement the routing into the nav bar. So that's one problem I gotta fix up. But after I get that out the way, I'm gonna transfer the rest of the homepage into React and all my other pages I have going. So that's where I am for this.
Beautiful. So the only thing you're going to be doing for your nav bar is instead of anchor tags, you're going to use those link tags. And then for the links, whatever path is in your route is what needs to match your link. So if you wanted to link to the terms in your nav bar, you would just say link to /terms. And that's how you would get your nav bar working. So it's just like the A tags. The only difference is your A tag always goes to something.html, right? It goes to that file name. Instead of it going to whatever the component name is .js, it's going to go to whatever path name is in the router. So you want to think about the router as basically what controls the URL up in the browser. And that's how you're going to link in between things, is using the path that's in there. So keep up the good work. I know from seeing your one-on-ones how the vanilla HTML is going. I would say focus in on getting it going in React, because there's still a lot to build. And the sooner you get it over to React, the less painful it is to build new things. I like to caution people in moving it over to React is tricky, and you guys have all learned that the hard way. But now that you're over that hump, now that you've got it done, building things in React becomes a whole lot easier. When you start integrating your API, it's not all of this inner HTML and DOM and all of that stuff that you've got to generate. It's just, oh, I need some data to show up here. That's all in state. So I can just throw in my use state, and I don't need to write, all of these lines of code over and over and over again. So it does get easier from here on the React side. The complexity now isn't in the front end anymore. It's, hey, I've got a database and my own API, my own backend. How do I build that into the front end? So we're going to be juggling things all over, but this is how web apps are made. There is very little change in architecture, no matter how you're building a web app. Chances are there's a database, chances are there's an API, and chances are there's a front end. And that's kind of why the complexity is worth it, right? Because even though we're learning a very specific stack, when you take that and you say, well, you go to a job interview and you say, well, I don't know the stack that you're using, but I know how to build an API. I know how to connect to a database. I know how to get that information showing up in the front end. All of a sudden, you can take those skills and make them a little bit more transferable. So awesome work. Thank you guys all for checking in. Jason, I will leave the floor to you in case you have anything to add.
Yeah, it never hit me. What stack are we learning?
We're learning what is called it's similar to the MERN stack, which is Mongo, Express, React, and Node. However, we aren't learning Mongo, we're learning Postgres. So I guess it's the PERN stack, Postgres, Express, React, Node. I've never seen it written as PERN, but the mean stack is pretty close to what we're using or learning.
Sure. Yeah, no, I thought everyone had great updates. And like you said, obviously everyone's working on different projects. And I know someone said, you can't really compare your progress to others. So really it's just, you just want to do the best version of your project. It's going to be different than each one's. And you're starting to see everyone's kind of going into, maybe mapping, maybe, the emergency 911 events. But really just kind of trying to figure out what's your best project, what's your best version, just working towards that. And don't be ashamed of where you're at, from where you are now, from where you started. It's amazing. So just, a lot of great progress, really excited to continue to see it. And just like Max was saying, if you need help, obviously schedule time with him, with the TAs. I think all of our TAs have been through the program, so they all know what you're in. They know the nervousness that come with Capstone check-ins, and you have a lot of people in your corner.
And Latonia, I'm going to hand it over to you in case you have anything to add.
I just want to say tremendous work. I love seeing it. I love the ideas. You all obviously put a lot in, regardless of how you feel where you are right now. And I just look forward to your graduation. So thanks for having me here. And hopefully we can have some great sessions.
Awesome. Karen, did you have anything you wanted to, not student Karen, sorry. TA Karen, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I got nervous. I was like, I don't have anything to add. I'm sorry.
You guys are looking great. And you're really getting down to the wire now. So schedule your one-to-ones. That's why we're here. That's why Max is here. That's why I'm here. That's why Latonia here. Like all of the TAs, anybody on that list, that's why we're here. We're to help you get through the last few weeks of this program. So like if you need help, just do it. Just ask. There's a lot of people that'll help you.
I will say that I think been involved in all 4 cohorts. We've done capstones in all 4 cohorts. I think you guys are actually the furthest along as a group compared to any other cohort. And I know it doesn't feel like it, and that's okay, right? That's the imposter syndrome kicking in. But you guys are used to running. And so now at this point, when we go through all those other concepts, you're like, you've been through the trenches, right? You're locked into this learning style. You got React under your belt. You've got JavaScript. You're like, all right, what more could this possibly throw at me, right? And because you're running at that pace and because you're taking those concepts, now it becomes this like thirst to take what we did in class and be like, shut up, Max, I want to just go do that in my capstone, right? You're going to be like, oh, now that we finally got the database, how do I use the database? Or, hey, now that we finally got our API working, how do we go do our API, right? So we're headed in the right direction here. We've got 1 week of databases where you're probably going to have that little bit of padding if you're behind in your capstone, if you got to get that one more feature in, if you've got a couple more screens to build. This is the week to do it, because we're going to learn SQL. We're going to learn the database kind of in its own little vacuum. And then next week, we start full stack. We start talking about how do we connect to the database in our API. We talk about how do we build an API. We talk about how do we get that data from the API, from the database into our React project. And then we keep layering on top of that. Then we use auth, then we get into it. There may be some of your capstones where you're like, I don't know that I really need a database. And that's okay. We will find a way to make your project full stack, whether it's submitting a contact form, that makes it full stack, whether it's just one little piece of information in the database and you can show that you understand how the piece of information in the database flows through and shows up in your React project, that's fine. We like to say that we like to make the capstone full stack as a requirement so that when you go to an employer and they say, oh, you went to a full stack boot camp, what have you built? You can actually say, oh, I made a full stack project, right? But that's where we're headed. We got 1 more week left. And then all of a sudden, all these concepts come together and it just manifests directly in your capstone. I will say that it happens rarely, but every now and then we have a student finish their capstone 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the program. If that happens to you, leave it alone. Step away, you finished your capstone, stop editing your code, you're going to go break things, pat yourself on the back for being ahead, and walk away slowly. It only happens, I'm telling you guys, everyone thinks they're going to be done with their capstones early. It very rarely happens, but every now and then 1 or 2 students a cohort will get it done. And if that is the case, like I said, back away from it slowly, use any remaining time in class because you're still going to be learning new concepts, but figuring out what you do next, because we are at that 2/3 mark. I think we're over the 2/3 mark at this point. So what you want to start thinking about is that graduation is rolling around, I think March 16th. Don't quote me on the date, but it's somewhere around there. You're going to graduate, you're going to take the weekend off, and you're going to get to that following Monday at 5:30 and go, oh, I've been doing this for the past 6 months. What do I do now? That is why we save Laura all the way to the end of the boot camp. Laura's module is probably more important than every other module combined, because it's okay, we got the code part down. What about the careers in? And so that's why we have Laura at the end to say, hey, let's take everything you've learned. Let's take all of that imposter syndrome that you now know how to overcome because of all the skills that you've been learning. And how do we apply that directly into the job market? This is not our first rodeo. Laura is an awesome career coach. Don't prioritize your capstone that week. The following week, the very last week of the program, is all about capstones, is all about getting the one-on-one help, is all about getting you over the finish line. But take advantage of Laura's week, or she has offered that if you get through all of the career coaching modules in Canvas, you get to take that week off or focus in on your capstone. So, lot going on there. We now have the finish line in sight. We get database done, and all of a sudden we're just sprinting towards full stack developer. We got front end done. We got front end done with a framework. We're now building web apps more efficiently. Now we get to tie everything you've learned together and finish out the web app.
I want to touch on your point, the careers thing. Earlier,
Yeah.
you said something along the lines of the employer critiques, saying that or previous cohort does good at the interviews, but not understanding the code. Could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, so think back to that blog project, right? Where we had 43 different steps that made the blog work. And so oftentimes you'll be able to have a conversation and show that, you're good at problem solving and tell a good story and be great at communication. But when it gets down to the actual code, what the employer said is oftentimes they get the technical interview, they get stuck at one step and people panic and think, okay, I'm not ready for this job. This isn't the right position for me. And so what the employer said was it's important to push through it, even though you can't get it working. Show me your thought process. Show me, okay, this is some engineering task, even though I might not be able to do those steps. What are the steps? Just write that down. So what we are going to try and implement here, and this is very fresh. We just had this meeting with the employer, but Laura has a great mock interview program that will probably start in about a month. And it gives you the opportunity to sit down with real employers and go through a mock interview, a fake interview, to get that interviewing practice. What we are going to try and get going here is the ability to do a mock technical interview as well, where you would be given a programming task and say, hey, go do this. And we're going to set it up in two kind of common ways to do it. One is, here's this project. You've got a week to complete it. Don't spend more than a couple hours on it. Go do this, right? That is one form of a technical interview you get. Normally, your technical interview comes the step after your initial interview, where they see how you are as a communicator. And then the other way they can do a technical interview, which is a lot more stressful, is sitting down in a live coding session where they say, hey, we want you to build this, go do it. And you're screen sharing with them and they're seeing every single letter that you type, and they're asking you questions as you go. So we are going to attempt to get something set up for mock technical interviews that would allow you guys to get practice before you actually have to do a real one. This was actually all inspired by Latonia and reinforced by the employer today. The employer was like, look, I really want to give you feedback, but we had 3 of your students from Lock 4, 1 from this program, 2 from the certificate programs. And he was like, there are some improvements to be made. And so we take that. And I think most of you probably remember from your careers in code interview, during the admissions process, we asked about a feedback loop and we said, how do you shorten a feedback loop? And a lot of you guys went, well, what's a feedback loop? That's an important question, right? Being able to ask, say, I don't know, can you give me more details about that? We use feedback loops all the time as engineers, and you guys may not realize it, but you are getting much better at closing your feedback loops. The program is telling you line 47 is broken, and you know exactly how to get to line 47 and exactly what to look for because you're shortening that feedback loop. The same goes with this employer. The employer was providing feedback, and all of a sudden my brain is going in 15 different directions of how can we take this feedback and loop it back into the program so our graduates have a better shot at getting a job, not only with this employer, but any employer. So that is still very much a work in progress. We're just brainstorming out some ideas there. And we will probably have a trial run of this towards the end of the program where you can get that practice. But very long max rant that is very typical of me. But what you want to focus in on, right, is, hey, I completed this project in class. That does not mean you're done with it. Once you follow along with me, once you get it working, do I understand it? Could I go through and explain this code to someone and have them understand it? Can I look at all 43 of these steps and say, hey, if I needed to create a blog from scratch and I didn't have this code to reference, could I come up with roughly the 5 to 10 steps it took to make it all work? No, you don't need to have all 43 steps memorized, but can you say, hey, I've got to make a homepage. Okay, now that I'm on the homepage, I've got to make a post editor and have that information show up on the homepage. Okay, now that that's showing up, what do I do next? I need the read more button to work. Okay, once the read more button works, where does that go? How does that page work? Can you sum it down to that level? And because you've broken it out into those 5 steps, it makes it much easier to break it out into the 43 minor steps to pull all of that off. That's what we want to get you to, right? Is when you're presented with a programming problem, we don't want you to freeze. And that's what a lot of engineers do when they get to that technical interview. They think, I have no idea how to do that. The imposter syndrome kicks in, their memory fails them, and they freeze. That's okay. That happens. But we want to get you that practice to say, all right, if I freeze and it's a live interview, what questions can I ask to get me a little thawed out, right? Can I ask for some clarifying questions? Can I say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Is that something that you would do? Some interviewers will say, no, sorry, I can't help you. I'm just watching you do it. Other interviewers will say, and the employer today did say this, they said, I would rather see the problem solving process and know their thought process and what steps they were going to take. That is way more important to me than the code actually running, let alone what language they use to get the code running. And so he said, I would be okay with pseudocode. And pseudocode is basically saying, all right, what are we trying to accomplish here? Before we do it in JavaScript or HTML or anything, let's write this out, right? What's this logic flow going to be? What steps does it take to pull this off? So we'll start with technical interviews that are easier, right? We're going to start with HTML and building a couple things and linking things together. And then we'll go all the way up to a full stack project where we'll say, you've got a week to complete this. Here are all the details of the project. So we're going to try and get together a library and then also have interviews available so you can say, hey, I can take this test, I can get some hints, I can see how we're doing on it. But in the meantime, while we're still developing that, now is the time to ask questions, because as much as you guys have mastered having multiple windows open, it's going to get a whole heck of a lot more complicated because we have our front end code, our back end code, our database, the live server. We're going to have Postman going on. We're going to have even more coming your way. The good news is there's no more new syntax other than a little bit of SQL, which is pretty much like English. There's not a ton more to learn there. Now it's just saying, I've got this one puzzle piece. How do I take this puzzle piece and fit it into all the other puzzle pieces that I know are out there? So that's where we go. If you can't tell this, like I've said before, this is my favorite part of the program because it's just like you guys have learned how to get the sponge wet. And so now when more information comes in, it can just soak right into it, right? You guys are now at that point where you can build things from it. But don't be afraid to hit the pause button during a break, during code along, during whatever, and say, do I understand this? And if I don't, being able to say, I don't understand this, or I got lost at some point in the past 15 minutes or 30 minutes is way more important than whatever you got lost over. And if you're lost, another student may be lost as well. So don't be afraid to break check me during class and go, whoa, need a minute here, or I'm lost. I got lost in the last couple minutes, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, I also have a bunch more questions, but I'll ask them later.
Okay. If you want to queue them up in Slack during break, I can cherry pick them for whatever I think will be relevant for class and then answer you in Slack on the rest of them or schedule a one-on-one.
Quick question. Is this our last capstone check-in, or do we have another one coming before
That is
either
a
week?
great question.
And if
Uh,
so, how far along should we be? Should we be almost to the end point, or should we be really done with it?
So I do have one more capstone check-in. It is hiding on February 21st,
Okay.
which is the day after President's Day, which will be our last holiday. And so at that point, what you should have working, and a lot of these words I'm going to say, and you're going to be like, I don't know what any of that means. At this point, at the 21st on Tuesday of week 21, day 2, you should have your database structured properly. You should have some information in your database. You should have an API that is able to send information between your database and your front end. You should have that integrated into state in React, and you should have your React interface updating based off of that data. And you know how to do about 5% of that right now. And in the next 3 weeks, you're going to know how to do 95% of that.
Can you repeat that again, Max?
Sure. So, well, you know what? I think I have. Let me see if I have the capstone expectations doc. I feel like I've already written that down. Capstone project requirements. But I don't want you stressing about here. Let me just copy and paste this in. I don't want you stressing about this yet because you guys you haven't been taught how to do this, and that's okay. I just posted it in the live stream channel. That is probably a little bit more succinctly written. But basically, you're going to say, hey, I've got Node and Express, which is my API server set up. I'm going to have Postgres, which is the SQL database that we're using, and SQLize, which is a Node package. It's called an object relational mapper. We'll learn about them next week. That's how our Node code talks to our Postgres server. So that's what SQLize is. You're going to have one endpoint for CRUD operations, right? Create, read, update, delete. Can I basically change information in my database, put information into it, get it out, delete it, whatever. You're going to have your custom API in your backend, your Node server. You're going to integrate that into React. That's what I'm saying is the state part and the updating the interface. And then the last note is just saying that, end of the program, it's all about Capstone, and that last week is all about practice. Any other questions?
Not questions, but I'm overwhelmed. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm overwhelmed.
That's okay. You will be overwhelmed until graduation night, and then Monday will roll around and you're like, why am I not overwhelmed? I liked being overwhelmed. How do I get overwhelmed again?
That may be a trauma response.
I mean, it's a boot camp, right? It's boot camps are known for being traumatic.
If I can add something, I think this might help like some of the students that haven't like gotten really much even on the page. I will say for my code specifically probably is about like 60-70% like almost copied and pasted from stuff that we did in class already. So like I imagine pretty much no matter how different your project is, it probably consists of a large portion of something that we've already done and completed, like that you have completed because we did it in class. So like I think like if you're having trouble like visualizing or like putting something on the page, sometimes just plug in stuff that we already did like in other projects if you think that it fits even somewhat the look of your page, and then kind of tweak that and move stuff around. But I will say like a lot of all the projects that we've done like really have built the basis that everyone in this class needs to get your project at least the base started. So give that a try if you're having trouble getting started.
I'm glad you said that, Brian. It's very reassuring.
Very true. And I'm trying to find the message that I sent today. I said, why do I always panic the morning of a new module? And I said, I do the same thing every time. Panic, forget everything we did last cohort, open the outlines, copy and paste them over, account for schedule changes, realize I've done this all before, nap, and then teach it. Right? Like this is all when my boss hands me a new feature and I go, oh my God, this is a huge feature. I don't know how I'm going to make any of this work. I go, well, one step at a time. Where does the user start? Okay, let me go build the code for that. Now what's the user interact with? I got to go build that part next. Oh, there's some data that the user is saving. Where does that go? Right? We've got all of these projects queued up, and a lot of the projects we go back and we revisit. Hey, all of that blog project, we stopped at 43. I can tell you there are a lot more steps than 43 that are about to change there. We're going to integrate our database. We're going to build our login system right into the blog itself. So not only do we have more projects that you guys can go, oh, the login, that's all working on blog. I need to go do that in my capstone. But we're going to keep on building on these concepts, right? So if there's any project where you're looking back at the schedule or the daily outlines or even the homeworks and you're like, you know, I didn't really get this one. Schedule a one-on-one. It doesn't matter if it's going back to week 1. We can review that, right? All of these concepts build on each other, and that's just the fact of how programming works. It's not that we built our boot camp that way. It's that all of these concepts all integrate and build off of each other. So totally up to you guys at this point to say, hey, we're doing this in class. How do I go apply that this weekend? Or how do I even apply that tonight, right? You're totally right, Brian. Everything that we do in class, not everything, a lot of what we do in class is applicable to your capstone, but it's not like we are masterminding what projects we do in class to make your capstones work. No, we're teaching you the concepts that you're going to need in the real world to build real web apps, to be a real developer. It just so happens that those concepts do work in your capstone, but that's not why we're teaching them. We're not teaching them so that you can go build whatever you need to build. We're teaching them because they're the core concepts used in industry.
So I have a question about, speaking of projects, actually.
Sure.
In a work setting or in pretty much any tech company, what is the time frame that a group of developers have to complete a project? And obviously, I'm guessing it depends on the complexity of the project itself, but roughly, or
Between 2 minutes and 2 years.
okay. That's
Is that the worst answer you've ever heard?
absolutely.
So let me elaborate on that. I deployed a website today and sent it to my boss and said, this is all good to go. And he got back to me and he said, nothing's working. I clicked on the first button and it's not doing anything. And so that is when I had 2 minutes to get the entire project working. So I went on the website, I opened the console, and the first thing in the console is a CORS error. And I go, I forgot to add the new domain name to our API, right? So it was literally, I copied the URL in the browser, I pasted it in, added one more line of code, hit the deploy button, and it was fixed. But everything was broken, and the thousands and thousands of lines of code that I had written were not going to work because this one little stupid CORS error where I forgot to say, hey, this is a front end that's allowed to talk to my API. 2 minutes. Windows is notorious for coming out with software cycles that take years and years. Well, Windows 95 came out, and then it took 3 years for Windows 98 to come out. That is a 3-year-long project. And there were, how many engineers do you think were working on Windows 98? I'm sure thousands, if not tens of thousands, right? Obviously, an example of a very complicated project that an engineer was in charge of breaking it all down. And that's what project managers do, right? Of how do we take something of this massive scale and make it all work, right? Office came out in 2003. The next Office edition didn't come out until 2007. 5 years they were working on the new version of Office. And that's when agile project management comes in, where they start saying, hey, how do we not come up with a feature list that's 1,000 features long and then take 5 years to build it? How can we say these are the most important features? Let's get those features done and deploy them to customers and listen to customer feedback to say, how do we keep on incrementally deploying, right? CI/CD is continuous integration and continuous deployment. How can, when the developers say it's ready and QA tests it out and we're all ready to send this out, can we get this out to our users without having to do a mega release that we've been working on for the past 5 years? That concept is called CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. It's kind of in the DevOps realm of software development that definitely touches into project management. With all of that said, one of my favorite phrases, other than "I don't know, let me find out for you," is the question that you should be asking as someone wanting a feature is not, can you build this? It's, how long will it take you to build this? Can you build ChatGPT, right? The big AI. Yeah, I can. Great. How long will it take you as a single developer to do it? The rest of my life. But I'll do it. I will make sure that by the time I am in my grave, I've made ChatGPT, right? Okay, maybe that's a little overly ambitious, but you get the idea here, right? Elon Musk said that he wanted to build a reusable rocket and was laughed off the face of the earth until he landed a rocket and now lands like 98% of the rockets that have been to space and can land on a ship with rough seas. No one ever thought that was possible, but he said, yeah, it can be done, but we've got to work our way up to it. We're not going to just one day land a rocket. We've got to land certain parts of it, right? We're going to break it down. We're going to engineer it. We're going to get better and better at it. And you know what? When we lose the first 10 rockets, I'm not going to be sobbing over the $10 million I lost, because when we finally do get to do it, I'm going to be saving $100 million on every rocket launch because I can go reuse it. So sometimes the answer is you have a long time. But whenever my boss asks for a new feature, I do 2 things. I tell him how long it's going to take first. And second, I prioritize it into a list. And I say, okay, you're adding this in here. Here are the 5 things that we're working on. Does this go top priority? Do we drop everything we're doing and go fix this? Is this a bug? Or is this something where you go, hey, I want, I want these 2 things done first and then try and slip this in and push everything else down. Just to prove that I'm not making this up. Nope. Hold on. Let me turn off the background. This is my notebook. And what does that look like? That is a prioritized list from this morning that I said, hey, what order do you want this? And you see how things are crossed out? Because that was the order I thought it needed to go in. And he went, no, flip these 2. So that's exactly what I did. I said, all right, it doesn't matter to me what I'm building, right? Like what order it gets done. But the only reason he could do that effectively was because I broke down and gave him time estimates on everything. You guys will be terrible at giving time estimates as junior developers. That's okay. That's kind of part of learning how long is this going to take me. Time estimates are hard for everyone, let alone junior developers who you don't know what you don't know, right? But you get better at it and you get better at prioritizing. And if you have a good project manager, you're going to learn from them and learn not only how to do estimates more accurately, but how to prioritize. And because of that, you'll be a good developer.
Hey, Max.
Yeah.
This is Latonia. I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but for new developers, like, did you want to talk about maybe being a part of a ticket system, not necessarily being in charge of like a full project, although it will depend on where folks end up. You may be at a smaller company where that's the case or not, but I wasn't sure if you would want to mention that.
Yeah, so there is one is thinking back to week 1 of the software development lifecycle. A lot of employers will ask you about the SDLC, software development lifecycle, because they want you to prove that, hey, not only can you write code, but you know what every step of the process is. You know that it's not just about developing the code, it's also about testing the code and then integration, right? Deploying that code out. Well, that's steps like 5 and 6. Or 4, 5, and 6. What are the beginning ones? It's the initial planning, it's understanding the user requirements, it's doing the design phase, right? All of that is part of the software development lifecycle. So even though we sit down and write code, we go right into writing code. That's not how it works in business. In business, a good developer is someone who will recognize that their sole job is not just development, it's also understanding all the other pieces that it takes to get software developed. What Latonia was mentioning is most employers will already have a project management system for you. And if they don't, it would be the first thing I implemented as I got there. Of, hey, how do I track my requirements? How do I make sure my list is organized? How do I make sure every developer is not just writing some prioritized list down on a notebook that no one else can access? Oh, sorry, that's just me. Actually, the first thing I did once I got all of that done was I went into Slack and I posted it to my team and I said, hey, this is what we said in the meeting. Does this look right? And it wasn't just to get confirmation. It was so everyone had access to it and knew, hey, when I finish this thing, this is the next thing that I move on to. So anyway, companies will use software either like Trello, which is that Kanban board, and everyone as a team can filter down on that, see the details. There are also ticketing systems. So I don't know if you guys have lived in a building or had a landlord where you needed maintenance to come out. And so you go on a certain website, you fill out a form and they say, hey, here's your ticket number. And that is used for the maintenance guy to be able to track the progress, to report that to his landlord, to be able to basically follow the whole process through. Oftentimes there will be bug reports that come in that as a developer, you'll be responsible for. So a ticket number gets created, it gets assigned to you, you work on it, you may pass that ticket or that card or that task, or they're all different names for this, onto QA or onto DevOps. Maybe it gets reassigned to someone senior, maybe it has some status with it, but if you guys are going into a company where you're working with a senior developer, chances are they already have some tooling in place for project management. And it's very useful to ask in your first week or even in your interview, hey, what tools do you guys use? How do you do project management? One of my most favorite questions to ask is, what does a 9-to-5 role look like for this job description, right? I know you wrote up the job description and I'm super excited about your company and I know all of that stuff, but what's an actual day look like, right? What meetings do you have? How much time is actually spent coding? Who do you interact with? All of that stuff is great to know in a job description. Okay, is that now less of a shitty answer? Xona?
Yes, because I mean, obviously for majority of us, and I'm thinking almost all of us, we're obviously going to have to start as junior developers, but it's a day-to-day and I'm guessing it varies from company to company, but it's the day-to-day operations that you have to do as a junior developer to be like, okay, so what exactly do I need to know before getting into the job? Obviously, we've been exposed and we know majority of front-end coding now, but after we're finished and we know all full stack, development, like what do we have to do after that? Like what is the concept and what do we need to what do we have to do? Two, what do we need to know? And three, how can we make that transition seamlessly? Because I know a majority of us are really have never been into into the technology world or have worked in a tech company. So that's part of like the
So the good
There.
news is, as a full stack engineer, you will have one of the highest salaries in the company compared to any other job title. And so because of that, a good manager will not only recognize that, but also be protective of you. And I don't mean protective as in no one talk to this person, they get paid a lot of money. I mean, hey, I'm the gatekeeper. If you want them to do something, you got to go through me first, right? So you will not be, unless you're at a very small company, you will not be responsible for all 7 steps of the software development lifecycle. You're going to have a manager there to help you extract business requirements. You're going to have someone there that is probably going to get involved before a user even gets to you to say, have you really thought this out? Do you really know what feature you want to add here? Sometimes a task that you get is, wish I was joking. We do joke about this all the time, but I got a task once that said the blue is too blue. What? The blue on our website is too blue. What do you want me to do with that? Would you like me to make it a lighter blue, a darker blue, a greener blue, a grayer blue? And the user just said, it's too blue. So I sent 5 different blue options and they said, I like this one. And now that's the blue that gets used all over the place. I wish I could be kidding about that. There are other things that take me several months to implement, right? And that, and sometimes there are features that are so large that we have the entire team working on them. And it is up to a good manager to make sure that you guys aren't stepping on each other's toes or roadblocking each other. And the daily stand-ups that we do at the beginning of class, what did we learn yesterday? Let's get brain juices flowing. What are we doing today? Do we have any roadblocks? That is Scrum. That is part of the agile methodology. That is how I do every single day. 10 a.m. I've got a bot that posts those 3 questions. I answer them. We meet with the team at 11 a.m. We go over it. We have any side tangents that need to be answered. And that is my one guaranteed check-in with the team every day. I may not see the rest of them. I'll probably Slack them throughout the day. And if they get stuck on something, they may need a one-on-one and we can just jump in a quick huddle feature in Slack. But we bring all of our heads together for 30 minutes every morning at 11 a.m. We make sure that we've got everything we need to get the work done. And then we go off of Jira, which is like Trello. It's actually owned by the same company, to make sure our tasks are being managed. And then every 2 weeks, we have a sprint planning where we say, all right, what did we get done in the last 2 weeks? What did we say we were going to get done and didn't get done? Let's make sure that no one was overloaded with tasks. Okay, now what are we doing for the next 2 weeks, including whatever rolled over? And then we say, go do them. And we make sure we're on track every day at that 11 a.m. meeting. And then once a quarter, we have epic planning where we say, all right, what are all the really big things that we're working on? I don't need to have all the requirements of it. I just need to know how big it's going to be. And that's when we decide, hey, what are we getting done over the next 3 months? And those are kind of our epics. But that's all part of project management. And if you find all of that fascinating and you go, yeah, I did the code thing, I made it through, but I kind of want to manage teams that do code and I kind of want to know what their problems are and talk to the users and maybe I don't want to be writing code every day, but I want to know the code well enough that I can manage a team of developers who's doing all the coding. Project management is a full-time job title, right? You get certified by the Project Management Institute. You take a class in project management. You'll be one of the best project managers a company can hire because you know how to do the code itself. A lot of project managers are like, all right, you just told me about this bug. I don't know the difference between the front end and my back end. Well, maybe you should go look and figure out what your back end is, right? But as a project manager who knows how to code all of that out, you could take all that knowledge and apply it directly into the tasks that you're managing.
Yeah, because at work, like we literally do the same thing. We do the daily stand-ups at 10 a.m. We do instead of weekly sprint plannings, we do monthly. We have a quarterly check-in. We're managing multiple projects at once while simultaneously training an entire 2,100 workforce.
Well, Exona, you sounds like you work tech. You just said you don't work in tech. That's tech.
I do, but it's
software. Like that's literally the epitome of tech. Like I'm not
it's
sure.
it's a state. It's technically a state job with a newly developed division or department in the city.
It's a tech job for the
digital
city.
services. It is. It's a tech job, and
tech jobs.
And I do a lot of, like you said, I do a lot of project management because I have to know, hey, I have to do a lot of data configuration. I have to gather data and I have to input it into the new system that we have. So it's a lot that goes on a day-to-day. So I just wanted to see how that varies from what my day-to-day job is now. So maybe.
But I will say that it's not just tech. If you think about this as if you're work for the city to pick up trash and be on the trash truck, right? Well, how is that managed? Someone needs to make a decision of how many trucks do we need? What routes are they on? When are their pickup days? Have we communicated to the residents of when the holidays are going to be and when to put the trash out? How do we deal with staffing? So if someone calls out sick, the whole city doesn't get backed up with trash. How do we communicate that information so the truck driver knows where to go, right? All of that, none of that has to do with technology. We can use technology to help with some of those problems, but at the end of the day, there's someone responsible for making sure everything is coordinated. And so there are very few jobs where you can't find, they've got some piece of technology in them. Of course, yes, as a software developer, you're going to be spending 70 to 80% of your day in front of a computer and in front of code. But it's that other 20% that really matters of, do I understand the feature that I'm building? Am I communicating effectively with my team? Can I lean on my manager to say, hey, this is something that I don't know that I need help with? Are my time estimates accurate? All of that good stuff.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, the one thing that I'll leave you with before we go on break is that all of these skills that you've learned are really hard to learn. Just because you made it through the 6 months of the boot camp, these are hard skills to learn. And because of that, when other people come to you and ask you to use those skills, they are going to have their crap together to make sure that you can use those skills efficiently. And so they're going to put up with you saying, I don't know how a sprint works. I don't know. I've never had a project manager. I've never had a team of other developers that I'm working with. They're going to say, we don't care. We know what skills you have. You made it through the interview process. You said that you were a problem solver. You completed the phone interview. You met the team. You did this technical interview. You have the skills. Now we can take the easy stuff and wrap that around the hard stuff that you already know, and that's going to make you a great developer in a business, right? I started making things as an entrepreneur, and I just made these little apps. And when my boss came to me, he said, well, why should I hire you? And I said, well, I've made these things. I made my Capstone. I made my whatever. And he went, great. I can teach you the rest. I can, we can figure out project management together. We can build a team together. We can do all of that. you already have the hard stuff down. You know all the complex things that I need in my company. And everything else I can train you on the job. In fact, he was using an entirely different programming language. I didn't know it. And he went, there's no way you learned all of this stuff and aren't smart enough to go learn one more language. And he was right. So it is daunting to think, oh, I've never worked a tech job, or this sounds new to me. But people are willing to train you.
Okay, because that was gonna be my next question is, are they willing to kind of assist with training if there's something, a concept that you might have forgotten in a program, or a new languages that you've never learned, are they willing to help? Or
As a
assist?
junior developer, that is baked into the title of junior. So if they're hiring you as a senior developer, they may be looking for someone who's a little bit more turnkey, right? What's kind of weird in this industry is you can be considered senior 2 or 3 years into it if you really push yourself, if you really make sure that you're not stagnating, make sure you're not kind of coasting, make sure that you're continuing to learn new concepts, make sure that you're working with other junior developers, and teaching them or mentoring them. You can get yourself up to a senior in 2 to 3 years. That is different at every company. Google has a 9-level system, and there are very defined tasks. And unless you are at that level and can prove you're at that level and have all this documentation, that is a more defined thing. In smaller companies, it will kind of be like, hey, can you complete a task without needing any help? Hey, can you start a project from scratch? And when you hand it over to me, I'm going to be happy with what you deliver. Hey, can you write documentation on your own? Hey, can you help in hiring of a team? Okay, now you're at senior level, right? And you can get there in a couple years, or it may take you 10 years to get there. I worked at AOL, and there were a couple junior developers who were like, I've been here for 10 years. I like what I do. I like that I can ask my team for help. I'm just going to stay here. Well, they were making 75 grand a year. So who was I to, bash them for being called junior? They were happy. They did their job. They didn't want to move up. Making good money. What's it matter? Okay, we're way over on break. Let's take a break. Be back at 7. Let's say 7:45. Get started on a little bit of SQL, and then we'll call it a night. Out. All sick of my rants? Want me to get just back to coding?
I actually had a quick follow-up on your last point. So you were saying how, well, I mean, if you push yourself anyways, it'll be about like 2 or so years before, of like keeping up on like concepts and stuff like that to level up to a senior developer pretty much.
Yeah.
My question is like, what is the best way of keeping up with concepts and like learning about different platforms and stuff?
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you are always learning the hot new thing, you never have the time to practice with it and build something practical with it. So my personal opinion there would say, put the user first or the business first, and say, okay, let me anchor myself in what needs to be done. I actually, my ex went through a boot camp before Careers in Code, and he was always learning the hot new thing, right? And once he got through that, he was like, all right, let me really understand it. Let me do a deep dive. And he went so deep that he was like down in learning how a code compiler works, or how the CPU is processing our code. And I was like, whoa, what have you actually built with this? Well, nothing, but I know all the concepts of it. And it's like, well, what good are the concepts unless you're applying it? Sure, I'm sure if you're working at Google and you're working on microchip processing architecture to make the chip, more efficient, yes, there is something to be said about that. But as a software developer, it's like, hey, what benefit am I getting from learning this thing? And so that's where I like to anchor it. of, hey, do I need to learn this framework to be able to do my job? Does this make me do my job quicker? And am I in a position to go to my boss and say, hey, there's this new thing out. I'd like to spend some time learning it and seeing if we can integrate it in. Chances are, if you're going to work at a medium or large size company, there will already be other developers on the team, and developers get very jaded very quickly about learning new things because they know they have what they know, and that's how they build things. And so if you make an argument for learning a new thing that the team doesn't already know, you can't see my camera? Oh, you're good. Okay. So the if you basically lean on your company, right? Lean on the projects you're working on, lean on, if you don't have a company, lean on what we learned in class and say, okay, what can I get better at? What do I need to practice? How can I build a project that's going to get me more exposure to that, get me more practice on that? I know I'm picking on Latonia here, but Latonia did exactly that, right? She said, hey, I want to go practice with APIs, but I don't want to just practice with APIs. I want to get really good at state and understanding React and state and how we can pass information around in modals and how we can store that information, right? And so she went out and built this project just to get practice. And now it's part of a portfolio piece and we can show documentation. And Latonia, if you can drop the link to that in chat, I don't know if it's fully finished, but
It's
Latonia.
not
Okay.
yet. I would have to share it. We have to deploy it. Remember, because Heroku keeps Herokuing me, so we need to old school deploy it.
Do you have your documentation in GitHub yet?
I do. Yep.
Can you share the link to that?
Yeah, sure.
Latonia is a great example of not only pushing herself technically, but also saying, hey, I need to be able to communicate this effectively. So she has a couple diagrams that she's put together of showing how the whole project works, right? We touched on documentation a little bit, what was that, 2 weeks ago? But Latonia has done entity relationship diagrams and process flows and all of that kind of stuff. So the basic answer is keep pushing yourself, keep building projects, and keep talking to people, right? Go to OpenHack and if a stupid question pops up, don't be afraid to ask it, right? Say, hey, I've never heard of whatever buzzword they use is. I've never heard of Angular. What is Angular? And someone will go off on this whole rant, and then you'll go, okay, but like, what category is it in? What do you use instead of that? Oh, it's like React. Okay, now all of a sudden I know where that kind of fits in. I can look into it and say, hey, is this worth learning? Do I keep on going and seeing 50 different job descriptions that all say Angular? Maybe I'll go apply that. Or you'll be talking to someone at OpenHack and they'll go, oh, I use Firebase. And you're like, well, what's Firebase? And you look into it and you go, oh, that's a database alternative. Maybe I won't go learn that. That's not what we covered in class, unless an employer say, that they need it. So you want to, you become senior not only by getting really good at the skills that or the languages you do know, you become senior by being able to kind of plan out a whole project and say, hey, it's worth investing into this technology and everyone learning it in order for them to keep using it.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Schneider asked me, he said, hey, someone just said to me, I don't use .jsx in my file extension. I use .js. And the person who gave him that advice was like, no, you should always use JSX. And so he posted a question on it. And I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter, but I was not an authority on that subject, right? So what did I do? I went to Google and I found 3 different Stack Overflow articles and a Reddit thread that was about a mile long. And so I just skimmed through that briefly and I went, okay, yeah, I'm confirming what I thought I knew. It doesn't really matter which one you use, but now I can, I don't want to say hold an argument, but I can kind of justify why I don't use the X in my file extensions. Create React app doesn't use it, and that's the dominant way to start a React project. So if they don't use it, why would I need to use it? There are some arguments to be made about, well, it makes syntax highlighting easier, and it makes it easier to identify what pure JavaScript files are from JSX file extensions. You know, there's a whole argument on both sides, but sometimes the answer isn't, well, this is right. Sometimes the answer is, well, it depends. And being able to have those conversations or ask those questions is important. Latonia dropped her front end and back end links in GitHub. So if you're curious about checking that out, not fully finished yet, but there's a phrase saying that software is never truly finished. There's always one more feature or one more bug or one more something to add to it. So,
Hey, Latonia, what's your thing? Are you full stack, front end, or back end?
Yeah, full stack. Full stack JavaScript. I want to specialize in Python and design. So you'll see a lot of I love to be really solid on the code. Max can tell you that. Like, I always have a gazillion questions, really nuanced questions at times, but then I really like to make it like shine. And he mentioned like me doing a summary for the project. And I think we ended up doing a data flow. It's more of like a process flow, but because I wanted to add in like a ERD. So I just try to really be detailed with what I do.
if you take a look at her front end documentation, that README, that is hours and hours of work. But to me, that communicates, hey, this is someone, you know, we were saying earlier, the comprehension is important, and that's what the employer said. Reading this documentation tells me, hey, this person gets this. It's not just that this project works, it's that this person went through and described to me how it works. So as a developer, if I'm referencing her code or need to add something new to it or whatever it may be, I can read that and say, hey, man, I understand what the initial developer was thinking when they built this. I wish I could figure out a way to educate students to create READMEs like Latonia does, but there's a lot of great information in there, and she sets a good example for what a project can be in terms of documentation.
It's good to hear that that's how you're supposed to use your READMEs, because that's what I do. I just throw the steps I took, what I don't understand, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Yeah, just explaining out your code, and same for inline comments. Sometimes you'll read a line of code and you're like, man, I'm really proud of myself. Like, that was a complicated line and it's all working. Throw an inline comment in there. Throw a comment right above it that says, you know, hey, this is what this is doing. This is how I figured it out. Leave some links to Stack Overflow if you get an answer that you like. You know, documentation doesn't matter to the computer. It matters to other humans. And as an employer, I certainly like to go into a README and see something that is beyond the standard Create React app.
Hey, Max, I have a quick question before Jennifer jumps in, if you don't mind. You just said that we can, if we find a good resource, we can just share that as Stack Overflow. I thought you could only ask questions.
No,
or
sorry,
look-
I meant copy the
Oh.
Stack Overflow link and paste it
Oh,
into your
okay,
code
okay,
as
all
a.
right. Thank you.
You can upvote on Stack Overflow. So if you find something that you like, you can hit the up button. And I thought there was a way to save the answer, but I'm not signed in to Stack Overflow on this account to check. I'm pretty sure there's a way that you can bookmark it, or maybe if you upvote it, you can go into your account and see everything that you've upvoted. Jennifer, go ahead.
Thanks. I always thought a README file just came somehow with the other files. It just magically appeared and it was some back special code. No?
Yes and no. So the README you can generate manually. When we do Create React app, it does generate a README for you.
Okay.
It does usually use a certain format called .md, which is short for Markdown. Markdown is a way that we can kind of do rich text formatting with plain text. So if you use stars on either side of your word, it will italicize it. If you use 2 stars on either side of your word, it will make it show up in bold. If you use equals and dashes under certain information, you can make it show up as a table. It's basically, if you want to think about it as like HTML, but more for text-based editing, that's what Markdown is. That is not to say that your README has to use Markdown, but because GitHub likes READMEs in Markdown, that is traditionally what they are done in. You can create your own README. You just make a new file and just say readme.md and start putting stuff in it. And now you've made a README. And if there's already stuff in the README and you say, I don't want this in my README, I want something else in it, delete it out, make a, clear it out and start putting your own stuff in there. There is a whole world and a whole art of documentation. And eventually you get to the point where your project is so big that your README should actually link out to other documentation. In other words, when we're on the React website, we aren't going to take all 40 pages of the React documentation and try and shove it in the README. We're just going to say, hey, if you would like to check out our guide, go here. If you'd like to check out the reference API, you can click here and get there. But READMEs are, other than Markdown, which is the special format they're in, again, think of that as an alternative to HTML. READMEs can contain whatever you want, and if they don't exist, you can create one.
Cool. All right.
The name is sometimes treated specially. So just like index.html means that it's going to show up when we first load the page. If you call the file readme.md, GitHub will recognize that and show up your Markdown at the bottom of the repository. So the name itself is special. But whatever goes in there is totally up to you.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. I just had no idea. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, it's a great question. Any other questions? Feel like I need a whiskey and a fireplace right next to me for some fireside chats tonight.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
technical interview question.
Yeah.
Something along the lines of earlier, it has to do with picking the language you want to solve said problem. Is that a thing? Okay, but then what if the company itself doesn't even use that language for their workflow? You'd have to learn it down the road.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the employer that we talked to today used a coding interview platform similar to HackerRank or CodeByte, LeetCode. They're all basically platforms where you can administer an interview test. And he said that they purposely did not require the applicant to use the language that they used at the company. So they said, hey, whatever language you learned, you're comfortable in, you can complete the challenge in that language. However, if you started working there, you would most certainly have to learn that language, and that comes with practice and out of requirement, right? So over time, you start learning, hey, I don't need a semicolon at the end of this line because it's in Python. So you stop typing that, you lose that muscle memory. But oftentimes when you do get a new job, an employer will hire you even if you don't have experience in that language, because they realize that all the concepts of variables and loops and functions and all of that stuff translates into almost any programming language. So oftentimes you do need to learn a new language on the job, but usually they give you a couple weeks or a couple months to get comfortable with that and get comfortable writing that. So it really depends. There are some employers that say, hey, we're hiring you for a Python role. You have to write Python. And that's the only way you can pass our technical coding test. Some companies will do that. Most companies, I would say, are flexible and will let you write it in whatever language you want. For example, when we hire junior developers at my company, we say you have to know React, you have to take the test in React. React is a big thing to learn, and unless you know a modern front end framework, you're not going to be able to do this job. And we really need you to hit the ground running and not have a learning curve when you come in not knowing React. But for a senior developer, when we hire for a senior role, we say you need to know React or Angular or Vue. And if you know one of those three, chances are as a senior developer, you can apply those concepts to a new framework or a different language faster. And because of that, we don't have that requirement. We don't have the requirement that they know React specifically. But yes, if they were hired even as a senior developer, we have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lines of code written in React. And so it would be a requirement for them to learn that new framework. And that's why we put it in the job description. If you read the job description and you're like, oh, this company uses React, I hate React, I don't want to write another line of React code in my life, may not be the right job fit for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? By the way, this is a normal thing that, and again, picking on Latonia, she can testify that every couple months there's that one class where we just answer a gazillion questions and everyone feels better. Bored, but feels better. Exona, did I make it onto your wall? Or was it something else?
You did. It was the hacker rank. It was the website. So yeah, you did.
Nice. Okay. So we're going to dive into SQL. The good news is you don't need to listen to me. We are actually going to be going through Khan Academy. And Khan Academy has a really great course on SQL. So basically what we'll do is we'll watch the video. I will do a brief recap of the video. There are a couple videos in a row, and then we'll pause and you get to do the exercise right in line. The today, tomorrow, and Wednesday will be in Khan Academy. The homework is in SQL Bolt, which you'll be taking all the concepts that we're going over from Khan Academy in class. You'll apply that to your homework. And then on Thursday, we're going to shift focus a little bit and we're going to talk about database design. We're going to learn how to make an entity relationship diagram. We're going to kind of learn, hey, we can run all these commands, but what does that mean? How do we store our data? The homework for next week, not this week is SQL Bolt. Next week, you will be practicing creating an entity relationship diagram for your capstone. It will be a plan for you to say, what information does my capstone need to keep track of in the database? And how do I design my database structure in order to be able to hold all that information? So that is next week's homework. This week's homework is just practicing what we've learned in Khan Academy, getting familiar with the SQL syntax. With all of that said, all the outlines are up. And the homework for this week, not next week, but this week is already up in Canvas. I am going to switch over to Khan Academy here, and then we can dive in. And I'm only gonna do the first video or two here, and then we will call it a night. I know we're going over. The good news is last cohort, they had a holiday off during this time, so we actually get an extra day on SQL.
The world is full of data. Every app that you use is full of data. On Khan Academy, we store data about users and badges and progress. On Facebook, they store data about who you are, who your friends are, what they're posting. On Bank of America, they store data about how much money you have and what accounts that's in. How do these apps store data? Well, they use a database, which is a program that helps store data and provides functionality for adding, modifying, and querying that data, and doing that all fast. Databases come in many forms, but a really popular type of database is called a relational database. It stores each kind of data in a table, which is kind of like storing data in a spreadsheet. A row represents an item, and a column represents properties about that item. For example, to store data about Khan Academy users, we'd have a users table with a row for each user and columns for properties like their nickname and location. Relational databases make it particularly easy to form relationships between tables. For example, in order to store Khan Academy users and their badges, we might have a users table and a badges table, and then a user badges table to remember which users earned which badges, just by mapping user IDs to badge IDs. That's a more efficient form of storage than having to repeat everything about the user and everything about the badge in the user badges table. Most databases come with a query language to interact with the database. SQL is a language designed entirely for accessing databases and is the most popular of them. With SQL, we can create tables, change data, get back to data that we're interested in, like we want to find out which users joined in the last week or which users have a particular badge. That's what we're going to teach here, and you'll actually get to try out SQL here in the browser using SQLite, a particular implementation of it. You won't be able to write the whole app here, but when you're done learning SQL, you'll have a much better understanding of how data is stored in the apps that you use and be able to use SQL if you ever build an app.
The biggest, most important thing that I want you to take from that video, think of all of this as a table. Think all of this as a spreadsheet, right? Whenever we're running the commands to select data or insert data or delete data or update data, whatever it is, we're doing that on a table. And the reason why we need SQL over just Excel is we need to be able to instruct the computer how to programmatically manage that table, how to structure that table. All of that needs to be done because I took an entire SQL course in college and went, what's the point of this? I can do all of this in Excel, and I can do all of this in Excel 10 times faster. Think about SQL as a way to structure our data so that our programs, our web apps, our APIs can interact with that data programmatically. Any questions on the video before I move forward?
So it's practically like an Excel spreadsheet for to use for the website.
SQL, yeah, that is exactly it. SQL is the language, is the syntax that we can instruct the computer to modify the spreadsheet or the table or the data or the database. All of that kind of plays together. SQL is the language that manages the spreadsheet, so to speak.
Okay.
Welcome to my database. It has no data in it yet because I want to build it up with you. What sort of data should we store in our first table? Let's start with a grocery list, which you've probably used in real life. I'm pasting an example list, which has 3 delicious items and how much we want to buy of each of them. Our first bit of SQL will be the command to make the table to store this list. I'll write create table in all caps, and then the name of the table, groceries, and then parentheses and a semicolon. We see an error pop up because the SQL interpreter expects to see column names inside these parentheses. What column should we have in order to describe each item on our list? Well, first we need a name for the item, which I'll call name, and we need to follow that with a data type. We have a few options. Let's go for text. If we look on the right-hand side, we can see our new table is listed with 1 column. But we also need to specify how, like our 4 bananas. So let's add a quantity column as well. And this will always be a whole number. So let's use an integer for that data type. And now we can see that new column listed in our table. That looks pretty good if we're thinking about what data we have in this grocery list, but we're missing something that we need in databases, a unique identifier for each row. We almost always need unique IDs for each row in a database because we need a way to identify rows later when we're updating or deleting them and not be dependent on other columns because those could change. We typically specify this ID column first, so I'm moving my cursor before name. I'll call this column ID, so that's standard. And then for the data type, I'll have to write this phrase, integer primary key, which signals to the database that it should treat this as the row identifier and that each row must have a unique value for this column. Okay, now we have our groceries table with 3 columns in it. It's empty though, so let's put some data in it. We'll write insert into, and then the table name, groceries, then values, and then parentheses. And here we start listing the column values in the order that we declared the columns. The first column was ID, so I'll put 1, so we haven't used that ID yet. The second column is name, so I'll write bananas. And the third column was quantity, so I'll write 4. Do you see how the schema updated on the right? It now says that there's 1 row in the groceries table, so our insertion worked. Let's add the next 2 items and just doing the same thing. Insert into groceries, values, 2 peanut butter, I want just 1 of those because otherwise I eat too much. And insert into groceries, values, and ID 3, dark chocolate bars have to be dark. Milk chocolate is not even chocolate. And we'll get 2 of those. Okay, so it says 3 rows, but to really see that the database actually contains data, you can click the table name on the right. This will insert a select statement in your code. And don't worry too much about this now because we'll get to it in the next video. If you want, you can pause the talk through and try clicking the table name yourself to see what happens. That's it. That's all we needed to create our first table and add data to it. It's pretty cool, huh? In the next section, we'll see how to get the data back out of the table in more interesting ways.
So we're going to give you guys a chance to write your first SQL. I'm going to drop the link to this Khan Academy challenge, and it's broken up into 2 parts. Hopefully this does not bring back traumatic memories of free code camp for anyone, but this gives you a little exercise to work through. With all of that said, you're going to get a rare opportunity to get an evening or 2 off. If you complete all of Khan Academy, not just the first lesson here, but all the way through to lesson 5. If you get all of those done, you do not have to come to class tomorrow or Wednesday, and I will mark you present if you shoot me a screenshot showing me that you've completed it. With that said, we are going to spend the next 2 days in class going through each one of these lessons. We'll debug on your code if you don't have it working. We'll treat it like normal. But if you are like, I can't stand watching videos, just let me do it. Shoot me a screenshot showing me that you got the lessons complete and you do not need to come to class tomorrow or Wednesday. Just an option for you guys. But for right now, I would like you to head to the challenge, the book list database. They're going to show you, let me just share my screen here.
Max, while you're doing that, you said through lesson 5?
Through lesson 5, yes, all
Okay.
in this unit 3. So in Khan Academy here, they say, what are your favorite books? You can make a database table to store them. In this step, create a table to store your list of books. It should have a column for ID, name, and string, right? So what we need to do is come down here and say, all right, how do we create our table? So we say create table. And if you're like, I don't remember that syntax, what you're able to do is go back up to the video lesson. And you don't even need to watch the whole thing. If you click the play bar down to the end, they'll show you all of the code that they wrote. And so this will be a reminder of the syntax of, hey, how do I create a table with the information I'm looking for? So what I want you guys to do right now is complete step 1 and 2. If you are able to complete that step by making sure your table has an ID, a name, and another integer column named rating, you hit next step down here. That moves you on to the second one. Once you get that done, you are done for the evening and you can head out. I will be sticking around, however, in case anything comes up or you guys get stuck. Feel free to raise your hand.
So lessons 3 to 5, pretty much, if we can do that, and then we don't gotta come. And what's the
You got it.
task right now?
The task for right now is just the first challenge in lesson 1. But if you want to steamroll through these at your own pace, just show me that you've got lessons 1 through 5 done in screenshots. You can just Slack them to me and I will mark you present and you do not need to show up.
Heard.
Once you get your 3 books inserted in step 2, you are welcome to get out of here.
Excuse me, Max.
Yes.
We were doing a rating. Like I just tried to do like a 6 out of 10 and it really didn't like that. But
So
for
think of it just as a number.
okay.
So it's going to be an integer, and if you put a 3 in, it's going to be 3 out of 5 stars, hypothetically. You're
Okay.
not really putting in the out of amount.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone needs help, definitely raise your hand. Artrell.
The rating that we're giving, is it our personal rating or the rating that the internet's giving it?
Doesn't matter as long as it's a whole number.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So we're just doing the 2 steps, which is creating a table and adding the 3 books. That's it.
That's it. You're done for the evening if you got that working.
Okay.
We will pick it up from there tomorrow.
You don't want proof that I have this done. Just
You're fine. If you do all 5 of the steps and end up taking off tomorrow and Wednesday, just shoot me a screenshot of like the green check marks over on the side. And I will use that as proof to mark you present for attendance.
Does this have a safe mode or something? Even the homework, and we start doing it. Is it a way that it saves itself?
I think it will save itself to local storage, but it is worth not risking that and signing up for a free account.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I will say that my progress from last cohort is still in here, and I am not signed into Khan Academy. So that is a good sign that they're using local storage and actually saving your progress. But all of my progress from last cohort is still in here. So I don't know that a free account is required, but it wouldn't hurt. Khan Academy is an awesome resource. Arturo, did you have a question?
No, I thought I lowered my hand.
Oh, you did. I was just making sure.
I'm trying to figure this out, and like I'm going back to check out the video, and
We'll share your screen. We can work on it together.
all right. Hold on.
Don't want you to think I'm a substitute teacher. You just, threw a movie on and kicked his feet up.
Can you see my screen? I'm on the right screen.
I can, yeah. Okay, so couple pieces of information that we need. So I'm gonna request remote.
Okay. I had before you do that, let me just get rid of this, and I kind of had something to start with. Okay, that's where I was left off with. And every
Okay.
time I go back to watch the video, it disappears. So I'll leave it there.
So if you go to the video and skip to, I'm just gonna open up your window just a little bit here. If you scroll down to the play bar and click at the end, it will show you kind of what all of the text is.
Right.
So we've got create table, the name of
in the next section
stop it. The name of the table, the name of the column, and the data type of the column. And then for the ID, we need the special one, but then we get the name of the column and the data type, and the name of the column and the data type. So when we go back over here, we're going to say, hey, create table, and we're going to call the table books.
Right.
Then we need to say, hey, you're going to have an ID, which is an integer, and it's also the primary key. And we don't really need the capitals there, but it helps us differentiate between what's part of the command and what's kind of like the content of the command. So we're going to do create table books, and then we're going to say it also needs to have a name, which is going to be a string. And it also needs to have a rating, which is going to be an integer. Close out our parenthesis, and did I spell integer wrong? I bet you I did.
I think it's TI, possibly.
No, integer is spelled
No,
correct.
no, you're right. You're right. No, that's correct.
Yeah, is it string and not text? Well, what's the difference? I'm sorry.
Oh, come on, highlighting. It is text. So every database, the one that Khan Academy uses is called SQLite. We're going to be using Postgres, which has slightly different data types, but are all along the same lines, right? So it's like calling it a double in some programming languages, it's a float in some, they all use different names. So in this one, it's just text. So now you pass this challenge. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, for step one, yes. Step two, I have to put the book names in the ratings.
Yes. So we move on to step 2, and that is saying, all right, now that we've got the table created, we can't insert something into a table unless the table exists. Now
Right.
that that table exists, we say, hey, we're going to insert into our books.
Mm-hmm.
And our values are going to be, and now we need to put in the ID, which is going to be 1. We need to put in the name of the book. So that's going to be, oh, why did
Yep, you're right.
did I spell it right, though, is the better
Tails.
question.
There you go. Yes.
And now it needs a rating. So we're going to give this a rating of 87.
Okay.
And now if we click on our books, we can see our Canterbury Tales are in there with our rating.
If
So
that doesn't go through, put an R in. I think Canterbury has another R after the E.
There we go. So now you can practice this insert syntax 2 more times, and then you'll see your book show up over here.
Okay.
So every time we put a semicolon in, we're saying, hey, this is one command. Go create the table. Then we're going to insert this book. Then we're going to select the books to see what's in that table.
Okay.
So we can create as many columns as we want, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm done.
See ya.
I just wanted to see if I like try it on my own to see if I wanted if I could create like an author column. Cool. Thanks. Bye.
Not technically as many columns as you want, but like I think 1,000 is the limit of how many columns you can have. There is no limit to the number of rows you can have, however. I've been in databases with 27 million rows in a single table.
Like, what's an example of something that would have 1,000 columns? Is that like finances or something? Like, I can't even think of anything.
The same, it was the same table that had 27 million rows. It was for an insurance company, and it was tracking all of the claims that had been submitted over the past 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And so my job 2 years ago was to do an analysis of the data and figure out like, hey, you've got all of these claims, but what is the data trying to tell you? And so we call that turning data into information. Data is just all the raw pieces of it, but information is kind of insights that we can extract from it. So we could turn around and say, hey, 20% of your claims are related to diagnoses of some heart disease. Or we could say, hey, did you know that flu shots are costing you $1 million a year? Or and so that was a project we did 2 years ago, was just analyzing the data.
I'll ask another question since it's all quiet. Actually, I don't want to throw people's thought process, so I'll shut up.
That's why we learn SQL, because the client initially said that they couldn't provide us the data. And when we said why, they said, well, you can't open 27 million rows in Excel and expect it to work. And we said, no, we won't. We'll just import it into a database. They're like, you have someone on your team who can actually like write SQL? Like, yeah, all 27 million lines of it. Kalai, go ahead.
Throwing error, I don't know. Okay. Is this one? Yeah.
Yep.
When I do this, it's just showing me the error. So syntax error. Oh,
No, you got it.
okay.
Favorite. Oh, you can't have a space in the name of your table. So you have create table favorite books.
Oh, okay.
Just make that, just call it books or, yeah, that's the space. That's the, yeah.
Is this good?
Space there. Put a space
Space.
where your cursor is. Yep, there you go. Now that should fix the problem.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And you might want to scroll over a little bit, because then you can kind of see, if you scroll over horizontally, you can see there's another part of the text editor over there. Maybe click the little arrow or expand your window. There you
There is
go.
a syntax error.
Yeah. So if you take out the word favorite again, then you'll be able to see what's going on in the database.
Max, if she wanted to have 2 words, could she just use an underscore, or should she use like camel case, or?
Either is acceptable. Although now, why is that not rerunning? Now I'm confused.
The other one, doesn't she have to change them all to books? She has
Oh,
to.
yes, you're right. You need to take out favorite here, here, and here.
Oh, so it shouldn't
here.
have the favorite at all? Oh, okay.
No, it's just a table called books. And then to Latonia's point, if you wanted to call it favorite books, you could separate it with an underscore, but table
Okay.
names cannot have spaces in them.
Okay. Okay, I think it's fixed. Okay, I can do it. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Anyone else need help before we call it an evening?
I think I'm done. I got the great job character in gold with their hands up.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a good night.
Good night.
You need help, Jennifer, before we head out, or anyone?
Yes, please. I'm not sure if I've gone far enough. So
If you
just gonna-
keep going, you won't be here Tuesday and Wednesday.
Oh gosh, where am I sharing? Hold on. One. Okay. That's still wrong, but I'll just move this over there.
I was like, that isn't Khan Academy.
I'm like, I don't think that's right. So I got this far.
You're sharing the wrong one. I see home and go to application.
Okay, where? Oh, my window's supposed to be over here. I just need like 2 more monitors.
Okay, yeah, now I can see it.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're done.
Sweet. That's it.
That's it. Well, that's all we're covering tonight, but you've written your first sequel.
That was cool. All right. Thank you.
I
Good
will
night,
say
everyone.
that most students are like, yeah, sequel's kind of boring. Or some people are like, can I do this for a living?
Well, yes. I'm like, really? I can do that for a living?
SQL is the
Alright.
English thing, right? How I said it's like basically English earlier.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
once you learn the commands, you can definitely write a couple 100 lines of SQL in a single query. But yeah, SQL is basically English. Once you get the basic commands, it's pretty standardized.
Heard. All right. Have a good night, guys. Bye bye.
I will see you guys. Have a good one.